Okay, so first of all, thank you for coming, and just so you know, we are recording this, so if you want to hide your face, go ahead. This is going to be a presentation about the safe and sound millimeter wave meter, plus some of its findings and in action. Oram Miller is going to present some of his findings in California. And Rob is going to do an introduction on millimeter wave technology in general and also the meter. So Rob, you can start.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Oram.
May I interrupt you, Rob? I'm so sorry.
No
For
problem.
those of you who have joined us in the last few minutes, please be sure to mute yourselves so we don't have any background noise. We appreciate it. Until you have an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll ask you to unmute yourself to ask the question. But when you're not doing that, just please mute yourself so we don't have background noise. Thank you.
Right. So yes, it's welcome to this June 28th millimeter wave learning session. And I will start with a brief PowerPoint, 15 slides or so. And Oram will follow with his PowerPoint presentation on his findings, and then we'll go to Q&A. So that's kind of the order we're going to go in here. And what I'll do is I'll take control of the screen and just get started with the PowerPoint and help you understand a little bit more about this specialized millimeter wave meter that we've developed. Okay, is that visible to everybody? Oram, Tony?
Yes.
Okay, I'll begin. So the 5G millimeter wave learning session is beginning. I am Rob Metzinger, the president of Safe Living Technologies. I'm an electronic engineering technologist, a biology environmental consultant, and electromagnetic radiation specialist, also a senior EMR instructor at the Building Biology Institute USA. For more information about us, you can visit our website at either location on this page. Just to start off, we have an introductory video, which is also on our website. So we will be, I'll just play through that and give you a general introduction to the meter itself.
The new Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave meter is the first consumer level 5G millimeter wave meter. This meter measures high band 5G signals between 24 to 40 gigahertz and comes with multiple accessory options for more detailed readings. These options include a horn antenna, a stub antenna, and an attenuator for various uses. To start the unit, press and hold the power button. After that, your battery level will appear on the screen. The mode and max reset button will allow you to capture your maximum values of RF exposure. Now you can attach your desired antenna. To start, we will be using the stub antenna. The stub antenna is ideal for most uses. It has about 50 degrees of coverage in the front and back. It is suggested to slowly move the meter around. The horn antenna is great for more directional measurements. It has about 35 degrees of coverage in the front. Finally, the attenuator is ideal for when your RF readings are maxing out the device. If this happens and the attenuator is not installed, the meter will display a brief message and automatically shut off. When the attenuator is attached, it will display the readings as 100 times weaker, so you are able to measure at higher power levels. When measuring RF sources using the attenuator, ensure you multiply the value by 100 to attain the correct reading. Overall, the Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave meter is the perfect partner to the Safe and Sound Pro 2, our low and mid-band 5G meter. For more information on the new Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave meter, the Safe and Sound Pro 2, and other EMF mitigation products, please visit our website at www.safelivingtechnologies.com.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. And just a reminder, just to please mute your microphone if you can. It'll just save interruptions as we move forward. Thank you. So just a little bit of background on developing this meter and some of the challenges we've faced. Yes, so we've been at this for approximately 8 months. So the final release date will be June 30th, which is coming up in a couple of days here, 2023. we're making good progress for that date, and we apologize for all the delays along the way. It's definitely been a challenge for us and our engineering team to get this meter with the capabilities that it has today. So there's a lot of work that had to be done. Getting stable responses required additional R&D to get to the desired building biology specifications. We wanted something less than 1 microwatt per square meter. And we did that, and we got it down to 0.5 with our horn antenna. So this was a monumentous achievement in our books. We didn't want to compromise on specifications and pricing. So we just continued with development until we reached our goals. Power usage was another difficulty. Getting 6 hours of battery life, which I believe we achieved, was a real challenge. And that's anything to do with high frequency millimeter waves requires 3 to 4 times as much power as we deal with lower frequency RF waves. So they're real power hogs for and are hard on batteries. So but we made it through that as well. Then also we had to find a higher gain antenna. So we had to develop a horn antenna, a specialized horn antenna for this meter. We have 2 external antennas for it. And that was very challenging and costly as well. But we got that. The sensitivity below 5 microwatts per square meter, that was the overall biggest challenge we had. So we know of other companies that had definite challenges with producing meters like this. We see why, and we have respect for all the people that have tried to do this and are currently developing these meters. It is a very highly technical thing to try and achieve. Parts are very expensive and hard to source. Ever since COVID, getting electronic parts has been a challenge. Our engineering team has to plan probably a year in advance for all the parts we have for our various meters. So the times have changed, and if you don't do anything like that, you're going to run out of parts for the meters very quickly. And also testing at third-party facilities. We found they didn't have adequate equipment to test to our needs. So a lot of RF testing facilities in Ontario, Canada, where we are, they max out at 18 gigahertz, but we need 40 gigahertz test facilities. So that was a challenge we had right off the bat. So what we did to overcome that is we purchased our own signal generators. We purchased our own calibrated power meters, spectrum analyzers, 1 megahertz to 40 gigahertz. So we could do this on our own, and we didn't have to rely on anybody to get chamber time in order to do all these tests. And the amount of chamber time we've spent on this meter is huge. So we constructed a Safe Living Technologies full anechoic chamber, so we can test technically down around 700 megahertz up to basically infinity. And that's a picture of the chamber we have. It's not huge, but it's big enough to do what we need. The ceilings, walls, and floor are done with anechoic tiles, and it's shielded with an aluminum foil barrier as well too. So very quiet in there. It's interesting even to stand in there. The sound is very muffled too. So it's quite a development that we've accomplished here, and we're very, very proud to have our own testing chamber. So that was one of the bigger challenges there. So a little bit more about the Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave meter. So the frequency range, in doing our testing in the last week, we've made a change. We can actually get down to 20 gigahertz instead of 24 gigahertz to 40 gigahertz. So we've made some adjustments with our base model, the stub antenna, to get it all the way to down to 20 gigahertz to 40 gigahertz. So in the US, the cell phone towers cover 28 gig, 39 gig, which is the 5G millimeter wave bands. And it's live in major cities primarily. Verizon Wireless, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish are the providers, and Oram will probably get into more about that in his presentation. And Canada's objectives are to cover 26, 28, and 38 gig. And the spectrum auction is planned for 2024. We have reason to believe that there is activity going on already. And because we've actually got some readings around areas where we didn't expect to get readings. So we think there's some testing going on in our area. And a little bit of background too, they're called millimeter waves because their wavelength is under 1 centimeter. So the industry calls it ultra wide UW or 5G plus. Those are little symbols you're going to see on your phone when those services are active in your area. There's a little caveat to that, and I'm sure Oram's going to educate us on that. I'll let him take care of that. So the base cost of the base model with the stub antenna is $849 US. The release date will be in 2 days, June 30th, 2023. For more information, we'll publish this this PowerPoint as a PDF, so you'll be able to click right on this if you wish to go directly to that page and get more information there. Some of the features, you know, it detects and measures 5G in the high band millimeter wave band, and from 20 gigahertz to 40 gigahertz. Yep, if you guys enter the waiting room or enter the presentation, please mute your mics. Thanks, guys. So yeah, it detects and measures 5G in the high band, a millimeter wave band, 20 to 40 gig. So again, it's we managed to get it down to 20 gig with the stub antenna. Common sources in this range, 5G cell towers themselves, the cell phones. There's various types of radar, the radar on automobiles, also some point-to-point communication systems, and more. So they are built in North America. It's a consumer level device, but we feel it's a little bit more than that, but we've made it easy to use and easy to understand, so anybody can use this. So it is accurate, it's affordable, it's at a fraction of the cost of current high band detectors, which there are very limited amounts out there of. It's a perfect companion to the Safe and Sound Pro 2 RF meter, and it will display in microwatts per square meter and volts per meter. It has peak and average readings, and it has a max or a peak hold setting as well. Response time, less than 50 microseconds. And the battery life, we're looking at about 6 hours with the sound on. There is an audio feature on there. Each source has unique sounds, and we made it just like Safe and Sound Pro 2, and it has 3 selectable audio levels, and instead of a switch like the Safe and Sound Pro 2, it'll be a button that you can press to get your different sound levels, and we'll go through that when I show you the operation of this meter. So to make it easy to use for quick measurements, we've also included the indicator lights, slight, moderate, high, and extreme of various colors. And you can see the ranges that each color represents. And basically, if you want a quick view at it, green is good, red is bad. So another important thing, especially for building biologists, is the antenna reception pattern that we get with these meters. And when we're using the horn antenna, that's the optional antenna you can get. It's a directional antenna. It's got a 35-degree beam width to the front of it only. So it's very focused on what it will pick up, and it will identify sources for you very nicely. Then we have the semi-omnidirectional antenna. We call it affectionately the stub, and it has a 50-degree beam pattern to the front and back, left, right, up, and down. And it also has some side lobes as well, so it will pick things up on the sides. But to get proper coverage, you would need to rotate this left and right to make sure you're covering all the degrees of transmission to make up the 360-degree. That's why it's called a semi-omnidirectional antenna. It needs a little bit of help being completely true omnidirectional by rotating the meter itself. And of course, we're going to get higher readings with this antenna as opposed to the horn, because it's gathering all the reflections from some of the sides, the front and the back as well. So you will get higher readings with this semi-omni antenna. So here's what the frequency response looks like for the stub antenna, semi-omnidirectional antenna. So we're looking at actually even better than plus or minus 6 dB. That was our design goals. We got this down to plus or minus 5 dB from 20 gig all the way to 40 gig. And the red signifies any changes or differences that we've had in the last presentation. So we just recently figured out that we actually have better response and higher frequency range or lower frequency range we can go to, and it even is effective down to 18 gigahertz as well too, with reduced tolerance. So the minimum signal we can measure with this is 5 microwatts per square meter. And this antenna should do most of you guys very well. There may not be a necessity to go to the horn just because of the vast coverage and accuracy you're going to get from this standard stub antenna. And 5 microwatts per square meter is pretty decent. If we can get
recording in progress.
So maximum measurable signal with this antenna would be 500,000 microwatts per square meter, or we can actually get up to thermal levels, 50 million microwatts per square meter with the use of the attenuator. And you can see the frequency response graph here. So here's our plus and minus 5 dB, and we start at 20 gigahertz and we go all the way to 40. And we think we'll be able to get a little bit above 40. It's just our testing equipment doesn't go that high at this point in time. That will change in the future though. So the reception pattern is 50 degrees front, 50 degrees back, and some side lobes on the side of it as well. So the best reception you'll get is to have the SLT logo. The stub antenna will have an SLT logo on it, and you want that facing the front or to the source, and the blank side of that antenna facing you for the best response. The horn antenna, the direction is a directional antenna, a very directional antenna. And here we can see the frequency response of it as well. It is plus and minus 6 dB from 25 gig to 40 gig. So that's in the range we need it to be. And the advantage of this one, it will get us down to 0.5 microwatts per square meter or less. And the maximum measurable signal on this horn antenna is 30,000 microwatts per square meter. Or if you put the attenuator in, you can get up to 3 million microwatts per square meter. So again, in the effective range that we need to measure in. And one fun fact that we've learned is we're not measuring these super high signals yet at this point. Oram will get into that a little bit later. They seem to be less intense than the 3G, 4G LTE signals that we're currently measuring. So
Hey,
again,
Rob, can you hold on a quick second?
sure, Oram.
I found a mute all button here. Let me do that.
Okay.
But I'm going to have to then manually let you speak again. So hold on. All right. So now, can you speak, Rob? Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to now. You may have to unmute yourself, Rob.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Okay, we can hear you.
We're good. Okay. No, thanks, Oram. That'll help the chatter coming in.
Thank you.
Which is probably unintentional, just some background noise, but no, thanks, Oram.
Okay.
So again, our directional reception pattern is 35 degrees out the front, and the antenna is customized for safe living technologies. Our engineering team has developed this specifically for our uses here. Yeah, so a little bit about the attenuator. So it's a minus 20 dB attenuator, or 100 times signal reducer, basically. And its frequency response is 0 hertz to 40 gigahertz. So it covers the entire range that we're interested in with this meter. It's attached between the antenna and the meter. And when you're looking at the readings on the display, you would need to multiply the displayed readings by 100 to get the actual meter reading when the attenuator is attached. This allows the meter to display higher power density levels. by a factor of 100. So this brings us up to, again, 50 million with the stub and the fixed attenuator, and 3 million microwatts per square meter with the directional horn antenna and fixed attenuator. So quite the dynamic power range we have. It's quite good. So also, we have to be careful with the RF detector chips and associating amplifiers and such when we measure RF power and higher power ranges. So we had to build in an overload protection circuit for this. So this RF detector chip is susceptible to damage at continuous high power levels. So overload protection is activated when the following power density levels are exceeded. So I'll list them here. If the stub goes over 500,000 microwatts per square meter, sustained for 3 seconds or more, it'll go into a protection mode. And if the horn exceeds about 30,000 microwatts per square meter sustained, that will put it into protection mode as well. So the meter will power down after about 3 seconds, and a warning message will be displayed on the meter, and it'll tell you to connect the attenuator to measure these high power signals. So that's basically what you'll have to do, and you'll be able to continue your measurements. Again, we're not seeing that very often at this point in time, but we'll have to see what more testers out there find and what happens. So looking at the startup sequence for the meter, when we press the power button to turn it on, it's the speaker power button right in this location here. A self-calibration will come up, battery life will come up, and if you have it plugged into a USB-C power cord, it'll say USB instead of battery here, and it can run continuously and do your monitoring for you continuously. If you have the USB power cable plugged in, there's no data that comes out of that cable, just an FYI. We will look at that in the future. So then the next screen that comes up is select your antenna type, because we have 2 antennas. This is the mode switch here, and by pressing it, you will toggle this little arrow up and down, whether it's the stub or whether it's the horn. So you toggle it to the position you want for the antenna that you have attached. And yes, it toggles that arrow up and down. And once you've selected your desired antenna, press and hold the mode switch for 3 seconds to select and set your desired antenna. So that's what you would do to set your antenna. And then the next screen, basically you'd be ready to measure. This screen would come up, and with the various different measurement types, we have peak, we have the max peak measured during your measuring session since the meter was turned on. And then we have a calculated average there as well. We also have a headphone jack, 3.5 millimeter, and the speaker power and sound button here. Once the meter is turned on, basically you would just have to tap that button, and that would get you your 3 different power levels, your 3 different sound levels for the meter. And because it's rare to actually measure signals unless you're exposed in an exposed area, it'll be hard to understand whether the meter is on or not. But when you hit the power button or the speaker button, you will have you'll actually hear a louder hissing noise, and that hissing noise is just the background noise, and that will indicate whether or not it'll indicate the volume that you are on. Perhaps in the future we can have maybe a volume level indicator on the screen or something like that. You know, we've never had that problem with the Pro 2 because you're always listening to sounds, but because sounds are more rare with this in this frequency range, maybe we should do something like that. But here we have the power via the USB port. We talked about that earlier, continuous monitoring. Plug it in the USB port, it'll run continuously. Then we have the mode button to select our antennas. And also this is a multifunction button. It's also the max reset, so it'll reset your maximum value here. And you can also hold it to change units of measurement from microwatts per square meter to volts per meter, and vice versa. I just hold for 3 seconds or so, and you'll see the units change. And you can flip it back and forth, vice versa, by holding that mode button. Future meters that we could could create some possibilities, some options here. We could do a combination of our Safe and Sound Pro 2, which is 200 megahertz to 8 gig, plus the 20 to 40 as well. We could also do a 8 gigahertz to 20 gigahertz range as well. Not much out there for that range at this point, so I think it would be a useful thing to do. We're interested in creating a 40 to 60 as well because of the 60 gig high Wi-Fi band. And then also there's also interest 60 to 90 gigahertz as well. We believe car radar is somewhere around the 75 gigahertz range as well. We've actually found it to be a little bit lower than that in some legacy radar applications in cars. In the older ones, we're actually getting measurements with our millimeter wave meter. So that means the radar coming off of current vehicles on the road is between 20 and 40 gigahertz as well too. That was one of the surprises we found as well. So we're also looking for suggestions. So if you have any suggestions as well, we're always open to ideas. Just a quick peek on another meter we're working on. It's called the EM3. It's an electric field, magnetic field, and a body voltage meter in the low frequency range, 50 hertz to somewhere between 100 and 150 kilohertz. We're still in the final testing mode of that. So there we go again, electric, magnetic, and body voltage. It is made and developed in North America. It's going to be a very accurate and professional level type meter. It will be third-party certified, better than 0.5 dB. Final testing required for sure. It's a great companion for the Safe and Sound Pro 2. It'll be more cost effective than the NFA 1000. And by all means, we encourage our building biologists to purchase the NFA 1000 if that is possible. This will be still a quite accurate meter, more affordable, and it may be another option for somebody that doesn't have the NFA 1000 in their budget. So that's what this meter is designed for. It has a digital OLED display powered by battery or USB for continuous monitoring like our other meters, and it will detect common sources like AC power lines, home electrical wiring. I should say wiring, not working. I apologize. Appliances and anything that consumes AC power. So it'll have 3-axis magnetic fields. It'll detect 1-axis electric fields, and it'll be a body voltage meter, which is like a 3-axis meter. It detects fields from all sides of you. When you're holding that probe, your body is like the antenna. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction to that. And we're looking at releasing that somewhere around September 1st, 2023. Just an FYI on that. And we're looking at around the $600 US mark for the cost of that meter. So you can click the website for more details as well. And that's primarily it for me. I just want to say thank you all for attending today's session and learning about our new millimeter wave meter. And I want to thank all of our beta testers out there that have had this meter for a few weeks now and helped us walk through some of the kinks with it and just helped us understand the use of it a lot better. So we thank all our beta testers out there. And we also thank you for considering adding this to your meters for your EMF toolkit. So we hope that this will be a good choice for you and it will suit your needs. So that's about it from my end, Oram. I'd like to hand it off to you and get you started on your PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Rob, for that overview. So let me go ahead and share my screen and turn on the sound. Here we go. And then, okay. Can you folks, now I can't see anything from you guys, but Rob, can you see the screen?
I can see the screen, Oram. Yeah,
Yes.
looks good.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'm going to be covering a field experience that I've had in the last 3-4 weeks with the new Safe and Sound Pro meter. Can you see me in a little square in the upper corner? Can you see me waving to you?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so This is my contact information. I'm here in Los Angeles, California. That's my website, createhealthyhomes.com. So I acquired the Safe and Sound millimeter wave 5G meter in early June as a beta tester. I've also had the FM5 5G millimeter wave meter from Brian Hoyer at Shielded Healing, designed by Guy Hughes in England for about 6 months. So this presentation covers field testing primarily in the last 3 weeks in June of 2023. There is more information that you can find on 5G as we understand it in the building biology profession in a 5G course that's on the Building Biology Institute website. It's a few years old. A team of us, 24 people, wrote that a few years ago. I have my own 5G article on my website, Create Healthy Homes. Just click on education and then you'll see a link to the 5G article, which has even more updated information, as well as a recent update that I wrote, which summarizes in more detail than I'll be going into in the next 20 minutes on my field testing in the last 3 weeks, as well as a PowerPoint that I wrote in January, which summarizes 5G that you'll find very helpful in understanding how 5G works. So I would like to suggest that you folks don't worry about trying to understand everything that I'm putting in here. And I packed a lot of detailed information here. I'm not expecting you to understand it the first time through. So I will, this is in Keynote on my Mac. I'll put it into a PowerPoint format and then send that to Rob so he can post it and Tony can post it on the SLT website so that you guys can go back and look at this in more detail later, along with the videos that I have embedded in this that give you a minute or two of actual video and sound with the meter in my field testing. But just to give you an overview, my mouse doesn't work here, so I just have to explain it verbally. So everyone needs to understand that 4G and 5G are terms that are used by the cell industry, and from a marketing standpoint, sort of a basket phrase that just describes any technology that is deployed by the cell industry worldwide in a particular decade. So everything that came out in the 1980s is just called first generation technology. 2G is the 1990s, 3G is the 2000s, 4G is the 2010s, which ended. Now we're sort of shifting and starting the new generation about 2 years earlier. So 2008, we went into 4G LTE, and then in 2018, we started 5G, but these overlap. So there's still, as you'll see, a lot of 4G technology still in existence. So there's a blend. There's always a blend of 2G is been phased out, 3G is being phased out, 4G will be with us for another decade or two. It's still the workhorse of all data transmission and voice in the US, but 5G, quote unquote, whatever that means, and it means a lot. So read my 5G article to see what that means, all the different technologies that are in the basket of what the industry calls 5G, but they go by these releases, release 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and so on from the third generation partnership program. That's where you go to learn what the technologies actually are. So just to give you an overview of what 5G is in the United States, this is not other countries, just the US as I know it. So in the low band, which is defined technically as roughly 600 megahertz to 1 gigahertz or 1000 megahertz, we see repurposed 4G LTE as the new 5G. It's a little faster, 2 to 3 to 4 times faster. T-Mobile has that at their 600 megahertz 4G frequency. AT&T and Verizon use 850, their 850 4G frequencies for their repurposed 5G. And AT&T calls it 5GE or 5G enhanced. We've had that for 5 years now. And if you see 5G plus, that's AT&T's millimeter wave service. It's very rare. Verizon has 5G, and if you just see the 5G moniker on your phone, as I do now on this Verizon iPhone, you have the nationwide service at 850. It's not being formed. It's a little bit faster than 4G at that frequency, which is about 12 to 20 megahertz, megabits per second. So multiply that by 3 or 4 times. But when you see UW, big U, big W, that can either mean the C-band coverage in the mid-band, as you'll see here in the next section, or the millimeter wave service up at 28 or 39 gigahertz, which is anywhere from 10 to 100 times faster, as you'll see. And so this meter that we have from SLT measures in the millimeter wave band only. So the mid-band, as you see here, and NR stands for new radio in the industry lingo. That's from 1 to 6 gigahertz. T-Mobile inherited the 2.5 gigahertz 5G that Sprint developed when the two companies merged 3 years ago. Then we have the Citizens Broadcast Radio Service, which is the old walkie-talkies. That has been auctioned off, or is being auctioned off by the FCC, and primarily Verizon and T-Mobile, AT&T, excuse me, are the companies that are buying that, as well as the C-band, which is 3.5 to 4.2 gigahertz. The CBRS is 3.4 to 3.5. That's coming online later this year, early next year. There are 2 tranches for C-band. The first tranche came online about a year and a half ago, and the second tranche is coming online later this year or early 2024. The 4 carriers, Verizon, AT&T, Dish, and US Cellular, are using the C-band and CBRS. Now, Verizon C-band service is called ultra wideband by them, which is also the term that they use for their millimeter wave service. So now we go to the high millimeter wave band, and it's called that, as Rob mentioned, because the wavelength is literally a few millimeters, a half an inch, quarter of an inch, at 28 and 39 gigahertz. Verizon's 5G ultra wideband service, it combines the C-band at 3.5 to 4.2 gigahertz and their millimeter wave service at 28 and 39 gigahertz. And they have more than 100 cities covered, and that went nationwide in the first quarter of this year. T-Mobile calls their millimeter wave service ultra capacity, and that is also, they call the 2.5 gigahertz 5G service in the midband ultra capacity as well. And then AT&T's 5G Plus is now available in 19 cities, mostly in sports arenas, stadiums, airports, but they are expanding. We heard this at the Mobile World Congress 5G conferences, that T-Mobile and AT&T are expanding their millimeter wave service along with all the activity in the midband. Now, I just want to show you this to show you that from left to right, the 5 different blue bars there represent the main frequencies that AT&T bought at auction 20 years ago for their 4G service. You can see on the left, the download speed in megabits per second, roughly 12 to about 50. Now that's replicated in the middle. That's all one combined company now, Sprint and T-Mobile. And then on the right is Verizon. So each of these colors, and just consider the middle to be all purple, from left to right, from low to high, it's around 600 or 700 megahertz at the low end to 21 to 2500 megahertz at the high end, or 2.5 gigahertz. That's the 4G band. And these companies share these frequencies, but not at the sub-frequency level. They have individual frequencies. And then the low and mid-band, low-band 5G and the low mid-band 5G is shoehorned into this in terms of their advancement, their repurposing of 4G at 600 megahertz for T-Mobile, 850 for AT&T and Verizon. Now, the mid-band is not on this chart. That's off to the right. That's at frequencies of 3.4, 3.5, 3.5 to 4.2. That's in the mid-band, and it's much faster, as you'll see. So just keep in mind that 4G service that we're all used to, that the population worldwide has been used to for the last 15 years, is roughly 12 to 15 megabits per second. Now, millimeter wave download speeds are 10 to 100 times faster. The mid-band is roughly 180 to 250 megabits per second. Now, that's a sweet spot. Good coverage, it goes right through walls, and it's 5 to 10 times faster than what people are used to. The millimeter wave service, because of the physics of how this works, it doesn't go through walls, as you'll see. It's really an outdoor coverage, and it's up to 600 or even faster. I got 2300 megabits per second download speed on speed tests in front of one of these antennas on my iPhone 2 weeks ago. But it's 250 to 600 megabits per second, depending on what carrier average speed. This is all from Open Signal. I recommend that you get on their list and get their email blasts, because they'll tell you what's going on worldwide in the 4G and 5G world. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that the millimeter wave service, 5G millimeter wave service, is still, at least as of 2 years ago, less than 1% of all cellular connections, all data connections. And it's only available in urban and suburban areas. So this is the average time with an active millimeter wave 5G connection in the US. All 3 companies, less than 1% of the actual data connection. And this shows this as well. The gray on the left is all 4G. The yellow at the bottom is all 5G in the low band. mid-band, and high band. And then the middle one shows you that the millimeter wave band, which is what this new meter can find, is the red at the very bottom, less than 1%. And even in urban areas, it's still less than 5% of the actual traffic. So we'll talk about that more. So here is a history of my use of this meter as a beta tester and the other meter from Brian Hoyer for the last 6 months. I used the FM5 that Brian Hoyer gifted to me in the last year, with very gracious of him, to test. And I've used it for 6 months. I had not found any 5G millimeter wave activity in the suburban residential neighborhoods that I was in for my clients there. Never found it on the front yard. But I do find the low and mid-band 4G, LTE, and 5G with the Safe and Sound Pro 2 every day. But I had not really taken the time to go out of my way. I just didn't have the time because of my workload and my responsibilities to go into an urban area and just drive around and try and find 5G transmitters until 3 weeks ago, when I got this millimeter wave meter from SLT as a beta tester. So I went into Santa Monica one afternoon, rolled the window down to my car, held the blue meter here, the millimeter wave meter, outside my window, turned the sound up, heard nothing, and drove down Wilshire Boulevard. And lo and behold, when I got near 14th, 15th Street, I started hearing them activity. And I looked and I saw numbers that I had not seen before, although I hadn't had this meter for a while, but I also had never seen it. And I brought up the FM5 and it was showing activity for the first time in 6 months. So then I stopped the car and spent 2 hours evaluating the antennas. So you're going to see that in videos and photographs here. So here they are. So this shows you at the corner of Wilshire and 15th Street, the millimeter wave antenna. It was from Verizon, and there are reasons why I know that, because my phone reacted to that, but not the other way around. I'll get into that. So you see here, there are 3 antennas back to back, and they're all in the millimeter wave band. There's no 4G activity from this, because I went down 15th Street to the left, turned on this Safe and Sound Pro 2, and I had numbers in the low hundreds. So clearly this meter was not transmitting 4G activity, although some of them do. So you'll see there are 3 meters there, one to the left, which goes straight down 15th Street, and then 2 that are diagonally up and down Wilshire Boulevard. Now, the photo on the left, what I did was I walked halfway down the block towards 14th Street, towards the ocean. And at that point, I really started seeing the reduction in the activity of the antenna, which is above the middle of that red car. And I turned to my left, because when I kept walking, I started, the number went up. And to my left, there is another one of these antennas. You can see it above the red traffic light. Just follow that pole straight up, and there it is. And one of those elements is pointing right up the street. And when I backed into that, there's actually an alley there. And I got 2 paces, 6 feet into the alleyway. The reading on the Safe and Sound millimeter wave meter went from hundreds to nothing, to less than 5 microwatts per meter squared, just by getting behind the building, coming from either direction. And then this is a few days later, a client called me who lives in the apartment to the right, which you don't see. Up on the 7th floor, she has some antennas right above. She's on the top floor, and there are 4G antennas, not 5G, or at least not in the millimeter wave band, up above her. But before we went up, I got my equipment out of the car, I turned on this millimeter wave meter, and lo and behold, there was activity. And I looked closely, and she said, "Oh, there's an antenna across the street," and there it is. You can see it in the middle of the photo on the left. And then there's a close-up on the right looking down from the balcony of her apartment, which shows that one of those elements is pointed diagonally right to where I was standing on the left. And then there are 2 more elements, and they're all 120 degrees out of phase, or geographically out of alignment with each other. So that's how they cover 360 degrees. So the one to the left goes into the residential area there, between the 2-story building on the left and the 3- or 4-story building on the right, on the left side of the street there. And then the one on the right goes, the antenna there goes up Hollywood Boulevard. So now I'm going to play videos, and we'll take a listen to, and hopefully you can hear this. And by the way, the sound you're hearing, I'm sorry, let me go back here. I only wanted to play one of these at a time. Let's see here. Did you all hear that? Is that a yes, Rob?
Yes, Oram, I heard, we've
Good.
heard it, yes.
Good. Okay. So let me play that again for you. This is what a 4G antenna sounds like with this meter.
You meant 5G.
Sorry. Yes, millimeter wave, as you can see. And sorry for the flicker. I've done all the adjustments I can on the camera on my iPhone and still have this flicker when I'm outdoors in sunlight. But you can see that it's roughly, I think it was 100 or so microwatts per meter squared. The floating peak, and then the max peak was 465. That was in Santa Monica. Now this is in Los Angeles. Let's play the other one here. And by the way, the sound you're hearing, that's the sound of the 5G installation. And my phone is actually in airplane mode right now, so it's not triggering this. As I've been reporting, this 5G millimeter wave antenna is always on. This is the third one that I've seen where that is the case, regardless of whether my 5G phone is triggering it or not. So I selected the best videos to put in this presentation. There are other videos that I took where I was explaining other things, which I cover elsewhere in this presentation. So I kind of covered a few items in that. So I'll unpack it a little bit for you. We've had the understanding for a few years, based on what we were told by engineers in the booths at the 5G conferences that I've been to, the Mobile World Congress conference here in Los Angeles, which has now moved to Las Vegas. And I'll be going to that in September of this year, where I spent 2 days each, 3 years out of 4. They didn't have it during COVID in 2020. Asking the engineers there at the booths at Nokia, Ericsson, Motorola, and what's the fourth one? How these things work, how it differs between 4G and 5G, how it differs between low band, mid band, and high band. And they all told me that the millimeter wave antennas sit idle to save electricity and they send out a beacon signal at -65, -70 dBm, which is 0.01 microwatt per meter squared. And I go into that in detail in the 5G article on my website, createhealthyhomes.com. And Brian Hoyer showed this. I talked about this in the most recent update on that 5G article. Brian Hoyer has 2 videos of his own that I saw where he demonstrated that the 5G millimeter wave antenna would not transmit until he took his phone out of airplane mode to trigger it to do so, to trigger the antenna to transmit. And so he proved that in both of those videos. And that's what the engineers kept telling us. And to my great surprise, in all of the testing I've done now at 4 sites in the last 3 weeks with this new millimeter wave meter, all of these antennas are always on. And whether my phone is in airplane mode or not in airplane mode or 5G enabled, 5G disabled, my phone has nothing to do with it. So that's a very interesting development. So let's move on here now.
Or just do one thing, if you could clarify one thing here. So if you were to roll up your windows, you would still explain the signal coming through the glass.
I'll show you that. You'll see that.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's coming up in the next slide after this one. So now I'm going to show the difference in field test between the use of the horn antenna on the left and the stub antenna on the right. So here we go. This is back in front of that 7-story apartment building. This is reading 206 microwatts per meter squared, max peak. Now I'm going to turn away from the millimeter wave transmitter, and you can hear the volume go down, and now it's less than 0.5 microwatts per meter squared. I'll keep going around in a circle here. Still 10 to 15 microwatts. I'm getting some reflection off of the glass of this building here. And now it's going back up 20, 30, 60, 80, 130. Now I'm pointing right at it. 190 microwatts per meter squared. And here is the millimeter wave 5G antenna over here. One of those elements is pointing right at us. So contrast that with a relatively narrow range, the horn antenna, with the stub antenna on the right here. Now I'm measuring with the stub antenna instead of the horn antenna in front of this millimeter wave 5G antenna across the street, and I'm getting 811 microwatts per meter squared max. And when I put my hand in front of this, it goes down to 30. Although there is some reflection off of the glass of the building to my right. Now as I turn, I'm going to clear it, and then turn. Now it's 190, 497, 200, 100. Sorry, and don't forget that my body was blocking that. Shoot. I won't start this over again to save time, but as I kept walking around, it never went really low like the horn antenna did. But it definitely went higher as I moved back around, but a much wider range. All right, so let's move on to the next page. Whoops, sorry. Now I'm measuring with, okay. So now we're in the apartment on the 7th floor. I'll show you that. So inside the house, we're getting about 47 to about 100 microwatts per meter squared in the millimeter wave band behind this wall where my client sits. But the minute we go in front of this window, you can hear the volume going back up again, and there is the antenna out there, right there. And now, and if my phone is in airplane mode, now we're getting in the hundreds. So again, we have 500 almost microwatts. Okay, and even the floating peak is 500 or so. Now we go behind the wall, and it drops to 30. 30 to 60. Can you clear it? Reset it. So the millimeter wave signal does not go through walls. It is going through this glass. Although if we open the glass, can I open this? Yeah. Now we're getting we're still getting about 500 or so. Oh, there we go, 1330. I get behind the glass, reset it, and we're getting up to about 500. So the glass, and this is low E to some degree. It's a little smoky and gray as we look to the side. So it is low E, I believe, not heavily tinted. So this is completely open, and there's the antenna. And now we're getting a 500, but it did go up to over 1,000. All right, now we're going to look at the window glass on my car. Now I'm actually right in front of the antenna element was pointing right at me. And I'm here on Washington Boulevard here in Los Angeles. And another commercial. My phone out of airplane mode, which turned on the 5G UW ultra wideband on my phone, and my phone triggered the the millimeter wave meter to register 500,000 microwatts from the phone, not from the antenna that's over there. So I wanted to show you that. And we are getting a higher signal. Let me clear it, because I'm right in front of it now. Hold it flat, and we're getting up to 900 microwatts per meter squared. Now let me raise the window. I have to turn my car back on, sorry. There we go. All right, now I'm gonna raise the window. There we go. Now we clear it. And it's on about 700 microwatts per meter squared. Now I'll lower the window. And it goes up to about 900. So the glass doesn't block it as much as we thought it did. The buildings certainly do. And a couple more. And again, this is a 4G and a 5G antenna or transmitter from Verizon. And on the left, you see that I'm getting up to 81,000 microwatts per meter squared from the 4G on the top, and 1,100 microwatts per meter squared in the millimeter wave band from the millimeter wave meter on the right. So these two videos, and I'll show you the second one in a second, are demonstrating that millimeter wave signal power flux density levels are much stronger from 4G at the same distance than the 5G. I really, maybe 1,300 was the highest number that I've ever seen from an actual antenna. I see 500,000 from my own phone that gets triggered when it's a Verizon antenna because I have a Verizon phone, and I'll go over that in the summary. All right, so let's look at the one on the right here. This is down the street. So now my phone is in airplane mode, and I'm going to clear this. But you still see that I'm getting 139 or 250,000 microwatts from these two antennas. I'll give you a little bit of a close-up here. So you see the tall 4G antennas and then the smaller rectangular 5G. All right, and so back to my phone. So that's 250,000 coming in from, and that's not from my phone. That's coming from these cell towers, which are right across the street. Now on the safe and sound, the millimeter wave rather, I'm going to clear that 500,000, which was from my phone before. Whoops, this is the button over here. Okay, so then hold it this way, and let's see what. So there is 5G millimeter wave activity from these antennas here, but it's not very much. 166. We had more down the street from another array, which was 800, 900, even 1,000 microwatts per meter squared. So again, just proves that the 4G signals are just way in excess of the millimeter wave 5G coming from these mixed arrays that we have here. So now there is the question of the fact that it's beamformed in the millimeter wave. It has to be beamformed. That's the only way that it can transmit. So here are the details, sort of a summary now over the next few slides. So here's what I learned in the last 3 weeks as a beta tester. Millimeter wave cell signals are no longer on demand as they initially were in the early years of 5G starting 5 years ago in 2018. Currently measured millimeter wave antennas that I've measured in four arrays now, and well, 5 actually, in the last 3 weeks are always on, all of them. They've all had the same pattern. The millimeter wave signal is consistent in its power flux density across from side to side, from 120 degrees from side to side, just like 4G and the low and mid-band 5G, which is all mixed together. You can't differentiate those easily. Power density of the millimeter wave signal is significantly less strong at the same distance from an array that has both compared to 4G, meaning 100 to 1,000 microwatts per meter squared with the millimeter wave versus 10,000 to 250,000 or more at the same distance from the 4G. Millimeter wave signals dissipate quickly with distance and were not measurable beyond a city block from an antenna. So I walked down 15th Street on that first afternoon, and by the time I got to the end of the block, it went down to less than 5 microwatts per meter squared. Compare that to 4G in the low and mid band and low and mid band 5G that travel at high power densities for more than a mile. I'm not measuring millimeter wave signals in residential suburban neighborhoods. This is really important for people to know. The cell companies are not putting them there because they don't go into houses. Everyone has Wi-Fi anyway now, and this is more of an outdoor coverage, as you'll see in the last point here. They're so far confined to main boulevards with foot traffic and commercial and apartment buildings. That's where they put them. These things cost, you know, tens, if not $100,000 each to install. I mean, there are littler ones, and they're There's a whole array of private transmitters that are going in at much lower cost. And there are some other things on the horizon that are going to not be welcome and change everything for us. But in terms of these things that you saw in the photos and that we're measuring with this millimeter wave antenna, you're not going to see it in residential neighborhoods. You will see it in commercial areas, high-rise apartment buildings, places where people congregate. So that we've known that for years, and that is borne out. So it's primarily millimeter wave service is primarily an outdoor phenomenon supplementing low and mid-band 4G and 5G service. Millimeter waves do not penetrate buildings well at all. Shielding would be highly effective when it's used for those who are highly sensitive. But these millimeter waves do penetrate low E glass, to our surprise, because we were told they didn't by the industry at the events that I went to and on webinars that I attend for the industry. At even 50 to 70% gets through. And so RF shielding film, metal screen, and RF curtain material could be effective on and over windows, and that needs to be tested for these 28 and 39 gigahertz frequencies. So I also found, to my surprise, that the millimeter wave signals that I measured are not dependent upon the presence of a cell phone at all, not in my testing. Now, a Verizon millimeter wave antenna, that first one in Santa Monica, the power density, it was unrelated to whether my Verizon phone had the 5G enabled, disabled, airplane mode, totally off. It was always the same from the antenna. And again, that's different than what we experienced and were told earlier on. But my Verizon phone, my iPhone, did emit very high levels up to 500,000 microwatts at very close range in the presence of a Verizon antenna, not the other ones, not the ones on the subsequent days, because they weren't Verizon, they were AT&T, T-Mobile, or Dish. So so RF signals from the Verizon iPhone are not present, they're not measured when I'm not near a Verizon millimeter wave antenna. And finally, only phones from the same carrier that installs the antenna will have the 5G transmissions turned on if they have the 5G service enabled. And also then that person gets the benefit, for those who want that, of the fast service for their data. Okay, next one. I measured higher millimeter wave readings on my the Safe and Sound millimeter wave meter when passers-by walked by in Santa Monica there when I was back on Wilshire Boulevard doing the testing, presumably when their Verizon cell phone was triggered by the Verizon antenna, across the street. These high, in my opinion, so far, my analysis is that these high RF levels from cell phones may be a stronger health threat than the actual millimeter wave signals from the antenna. Now, granted, the millimeter wave signals from the antenna are beamformed. We know that for sure. It's the only way that they can transmit. I do not know if the RF from cell phones that are triggered by the millimeter wave antenna are beamformed as well. That's to be determined, and that's something I'm going to ask when I meet with the guys, and the women at who man the booths and answer questions for people at the trade show that I'm going to in September. This is the last slide. Considering that you will likely not see millimeter wave signals in suburban residential areas, millimeter wave meter, this meter from Safe Living Technologies is valuable, in my opinion, for reassuring clients that they do not have 5G out there outside their house, and they're greatly relieved. I can assure you of that. My clients, for the last 6 months since I've been using the FM5, I say, well, I'm not finding anything, which is a disappointment to me because I want to see them, but I never did until I started really hunting for them in downtown areas. But my client said, oh, I'm glad. I said, and I realized that's the value. There's great value in reassuring your clients that they don't have the dreaded millimeter wave 5G. You can also see where millimeter wave service does exist in urban areas for people who are sensitive, who need to avoid that area because they will be triggered. Their body will be triggered, not just their phone. And you can see and show your clients how strong and pervasive 4G LTE and low to mid 5G is using the Pro 2. And you can also show how strong the RF levels are from all the portable wireless devices within a client's personal space. Their cell phones, tablets, and laptops. Many of us not just in the building biology profession, but others as well, have been saying that to the larger EMF community for many years now, that in the same breath that we talk about 5G and having needing to be aware of its presence, measuring it now, but you know, trying to get city councils to not issue the permits, you know, the planning commissions, and protecting people and alerting citizens. But in the same breath, we also need to be telling these same folks to pay attention to the wireless devices that they carry in their pockets and have throughout their homes. So that's something that we've been saying for years, and it really needs to be continued. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation here. Let me stop sharing. I know Shane has his hand up, and there we go. But go ahead, Tony and Rob, and take it from here. Or did you want me to do the Q&A?
Yeah, thank you very much, Oram. Yeah, if you yeah, feel free. We'll take as many questions as we can in the limited time we have left.
Okay.
And go from there.
Okay.
So,
Shane, you're up first.
Hey, thanks, Oram. And thank you, Rob, and your team. All the development that's gone into this and the way you've made it effective and user-friendly, and all the testing and all the blood, sweat, and tears, even this webinar, I really appreciate it all. So thank you. Just a couple questions. First off is, as far as the two antennas, any thoughts, Oram or Rob, that you could share on using them because of their different function as far as a measurement protocol, and then for like a building biologist? And then secondly, as the research around 5G and these new frequencies and new patterns of deployment is growing and building, and we're learning how it interacts with the body, do you foresee a subcategory in the building biology guidelines for these wavelengths? Are we to treat 1 microwatt of LTE the same as 1 microwatt of millimeter wave, you know, something like that?
yeah, excellent question, Shane. Thanks for the kind comments. Yeah, like addressing that, first of all, the exposure guidelines, we don't have specific exposure guidelines for these higher frequencies at this point. So I'm going to assume we're going to treat them the same as the lower frequency guidelines of RF. More strides need to be taken forward with that, and we need to understand it a little bit more. And I'll let Oram comment on that a little bit too, but just commenting on the use of the antennas. I think for measurement protocols, I think we can use the same process as the Safe and Sound Pro 2 with the semi-omnidirectional antenna or the stub antenna. You know, we can do our figure 8 pattern that we normally do and look at the max hold, clear it, you know, do that 3 or 4 times, seeing what our peak readings are and using that in our building biology evaluations. If we're interested in finding the source, then you can pull out that horn antenna. You can use your body to shield the stub antenna to try and locate sources as well. So that's my 2 cents on that. Oram, further comments?
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. What Rob told us, sorry, I was cutting and pasting what Alistair put in the chat about the satellite, that link there. And anyway, we'll get to that. Shane, Rob said that the horn antenna is just like, you know, the Gigahertz Solutions log pair antenna in single axis or 2 axis. We use that for directional analysis, for looking for sources. Same thing with the horn antenna. So for instance, when I walked away from the antenna on Wilshire and 15th across the street from where my car was parked, and I was on across the street from the antenna on the same side that my car was on, and I started walking away from it just to see how far I had to go before how far would the millimeter wave signal go, and I got to the middle of the block, and the reading with the stub antenna started to go up, and I was confused by that, and I thought, oh, there has to be another antenna. And I put on the horn antenna and I started moving around, and I found a strong signal, and with the meter held against my body, which is something that Rob has taught us and teaches the building biology students in our training courses for years, he and Larry Gust, which is to take even this meter, or even the early days of the, we still use the gigahertz solutions meters, and you hold it in front of you, close to your chest, and we are full of water. And so then rotate in place, and there clearly will be a position where the reading is lowest. That means that the transmitter, that it is the strongest one, particularly in the room, is behind you. And then you when you turn around, then it comes in from the side and it picks it up again. So in the same, I knew that, and I'd done that for years. So I did the same thing with this. And then I used the horn antenna, and as I turned and went to the west, lo and behold, there was another signal. So I walked down, and then I saw that other antenna. So does that answer the question? That's how I use it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Gail, so nice to see you. How are you? Old friend and client. Gail, you're next. Unmute your, there you go.
It's actually my husband, but go ahead.
My question was, when you were talking about the millimeter waves not being on all the time and not being triggered by your cell phone.
No, they are on all the time.
I know, but I'm just saying, could they have been triggered by somebody else's cell phone?
Good question. I knew that. And I paid close attention to that. And there were times when I was the only pedestrian, and in front of the antenna that was going down 15th Street, down that side street. There was nobody, just me. And if there had been, there would have been all sorts of fluctuations of the signal strength. And I didn't see that. It was very consistent, just like a 4G antenna.
Right. Okay. My other question is low and mid-band 5G generally is stronger than 4G LTE?
No.
On the same
power density. The power density is, let's see, how many. So the question is, how many watts effective radiated power does it broadcast? No, it's what the way that they increase the download speed, which is the feature that they're promoting in getting people. I mean, you don't buy 5G service. When you get a new phone, you have the 5G low band, mid band, high band access embedded in the phone. Now, has been a push, an ongoing push for people to maybe get a new phone before they're ready otherwise, to try and get into the 5G realm and get that faster download speed. Does that make sense? That's one of the reasons I went to these conferences, to understand how the industry thinks about this thing from a marketing standpoint. So
the basis of my question was, if we have a 4G antenna somewhere and then they upgrade the antenna to 5G, what
does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean for us? Are we going to have, you probably just need to test it with a meter and find out if it's.
You've got 2 meters now. See, this one measures the low and anything in the low and mid band. Doesn't matter really whether it's 4G or 5G. That's why I keep saying to people, we have to sort of let go of the number and just call it 4G/5G, or just say cellular service. Okay. Now this one measures the high band, which we've been missing all these years.
Right.
We've never had this before. And we only had this other one for 6 months or so. So, and Rob has really invented a really easy to use meter. It's laid out the same way as the Safe and Sound Pro 2. If you have one of these, you'll easily be able to add this to it. And it's just well designed, Rob. My hat's off to you too. You've just done a great job of figuring this out.
Thank you, Oram. I have to thank my engineering team as well, Bruce and David, for helping with that and being patient and working with this along the way. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and I think we finally got it down to what we want it to.
Yes. So let's see, were there any other thoughts? What was your question again, Gail and Richard?
My question was, if I have a 4G LTE tower in the neighborhood and they upgraded to a low mid-band 5G, there's no millimeter wave on the tower. There's just, now it's supposed to be low and mid-band 5G. Is there any really difference to someone in the neighborhood? I mean, I could be exposed greater.
All right. I knew there was more to talk about. That's why I came back to, and Sharon, we'll get to you in just a moment. So you bring up a very, very good point that we've been talking about for a few years now. Okay, so when T-Mobile and AT&T came out with their repurposed 600 and 850 megahertz 5G, which is shared with their 4G. I remember going to that first meeting in 2018 at the LA Convention Center, and there was a booth for Ericsson, and they had T-Mobile. All of these manufacturers sell to all 4 or 5 cell carriers in the United States. All cell carriers purchase antennas from all 4 manufacturers. And so they all know each other, you know, they know what the needs are. And so, and they had a display, and it was showing 4G and 5G, and it was at 600 megahertz, which is the workhorse for T-Mobile's 4G service, just as 700 megahertz is, it has been said, the workhorse for Verizon's 4G data service. So I said to the guys, I know that all we care about in the EMF community is the beamforming in terms of 5G. I mean, we need to care about a whole lot of other things, and we need to sit down and go over all the details, all the technologies that are being deployed in 5G that have not been deployed in 4G or prior generations. What's new? And that you look in the releases, release 15, 16, 17, 18, standalone technology, 256 quadrature amplitude modulation, the modulation, all of these different features that are new. What are the biological impacts? That's really what we need to analyze, so we understand what we're talking about, which differ. See, none of that stuff goes on in the low band, or very little of it. Very little of it. There's no beamforming at 600 megahertz. You can't beamform below 2 gig. So I said to the guys at the Ericsson booth, what's different between 5G versus the 4G at 600 megahertz? And they said modulation. Now, and After Takeover has talked about that. The modulation of the signal, the digitization, the polarization, it changes the signal and in such a way that it's more harmful biologically to us. There are reports from people who say, in my neighborhood, I could always take a walk, even though that we've had a small cell antenna, and it's a Verizon antenna for the last decade or more, 4G antenna. And then the truck came along and did something. It was a Verizon truck, and I asked them, what are you doing? They said, we're putting in 4G advanced. It wasn't even 5G. It was just 4G advanced. And then the guy said, I can't walk on that block anymore. It hurts me. He's electrically sensitive. There's something that changed. It's modified. All the 4G advanced is much more modulated. So that has biological effects.
So the modulation pattern is different between 4G LTE and 5G, but signal strength, my answer to that would be, it would probably be about the same. Would you agree with that, Oram?
I would, and that's not the important thing. I mean, Arthur Furstenberg has made that very clear, and so have all the electrically sensitive people.
Well, that was the answer to the question, though. So we just wanted to know the power density as well, but you stating the modulation patterns are different is the biological concern that is very important as well. Yes. And particularly the beamforming. And I am concerned about the fact that we know the millimeter wave signals that we're measuring now are beamformed. We know they go through glass, and so everybody who's on the front side of that apartment building that I went into is getting that into it's coming through the sliding glass door, and then it's reflecting off of the indoor surfaces. So that's why I'm getting 60 to 90 microwatts behind the wall. It's probably not coming through the wall. It's coming from reflected through the glass off of the other wall and to where she sits all day at her desk behind the wall. You see, but what is it? It's not the beacon signal, but it's beamformed. So we need more analysis. We need to understand more how this works and why it's always on compared to what they said before. So, but we can see some of these patterns now with this new meter. Sharon, please, your question.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Rob and team, for creating this meter. It seems like it's going to be great to use. I can't wait to get mine. So thank you so much for all the time and effort developing it and being on the cutting edge of what we need as the industry changes. And also, Oram, I wanted to thank you for creating those wonderful videos. It was excellent to see how it worked in action. So that was very helpful.
You're welcome.
So my question is to you, Oram, regarding the 7th floor inside when you were testing it. I was wondering what the material of the building was. Was it brick, stucco? Do you know what the difference between the glass and the wall when you showed
Not-
that?
95% of buildings are clad in stucco here in Southern California, which-
Okay.
which is, you know, a quarter of an inch of cement.
Right. And so I was wondering if it had anything to do with the mesh layer underneath that was helping to attenuate.
The mesh
Uh,
is too big. Even 4G signals go right through. When you, so remember, 600 megahertz has a wavelength of 15 inches. It goes through everything easily. And but it's slow. It's only 600 megahertz, but it goes for even 100 miles. There's many square miles. That's the thing about the coverage that they talk about down at 600, 700 megahertz. 2.4 gigahertz. Now you're down to maybe 5 inches. And then the millimeter wave 3.5 to 4 gig is maybe 2 to 3 inches. And then the millimeter wave band starting at 20 gigahertz. Now you're down to half an inch to a quarter of an inch millimeter wave, 2 to 3 to 4 millimeters. And the physics, and I go into this in great detail, Sharon, first of all, in the class that you guys took and that you helped teach. And then also on my website, the 5G article on createhealthyhomes.com in the education section, I have many updates, many parts. I've been writing that thing for 5 years. It's really long and it describes it in great detail, all the details about this, about the physics and why they need to beamform it. See, the reason why they're expanding up into the millimeter wave band is simply because of all the available bandwidth up there. They talk about 100, 200, 300 megahertz of bandwidth, which is not a frequency, it's the amount of space you have. So they can download a lot of data, but the physics of it are such that the wavelength is so short, it does not go through walls. So it's an outdoor phenomenon, or in large spaces like convention centers, airports, subways, metro stops, they'll put the stadiums, they'll put the additional 5G antennas indoor. They have them outside and inside as repeaters, so that you get the service whether you're outdoors or indoors. But
Yeah,
it doesn't go through walls.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand and theorize in my own mind how the building material affected your test. The half inch or inch of stucco, cement always contains a little bit of water, and from what we read, it doesn't go as well in fog or rain.
Right, that's true. It doesn't.
That. And then the e-coating of windows, it's a thin metal coating. I was wondering
It's sprayed on it.
Repeater,
It's sprayed on in the factory. We thought, because I heard from the engineers that they didn't like it because it really blocked the signal. So I thought that's what their testing showed. I was very surprised to see how much got through. But again, something's changed in the last year. The last time I was able to go to one of these conferences was in 2021. I couldn't go last year because it moved to Las Vegas and I was teaching the same week that it was held. I would have gone otherwise. So this year I am going to go, and I'll ask them what's changed in the last 12 to 18 months in terms of, so you ask good questions. I've only tested twice indoors. Well, once indoors in that lady's apartment. The other was when I stepped back behind the edge of a one-story commercial building in that alleyway in Santa Monica, and it went down to -5 or less than 5 microwatts. And then I took 2 steps forward and I was back into hundreds, or about 180 to 100 to my right or to my left, because I was a half a block away now from the antennas there. So we need to explore that further.
Yeah, I'm thinking because you have that advantage out west of having more cement in your construction than apartment buildings here.
Right.
It's a wood frame with.
Oh yeah, that's not going to.
Be invisible.
Well, when you get your meter, let us know. We're going to, a month from now, when everybody gets their meters, we're going to have a whole lot more data, even a month from now. We have another meeting scheduled on July 12th, so we can revisit that and let's hear from you and see what you're finding. As you find these antennas, you have to go outside, find the antenna first. And what you can do is what I did, just turn it on and turn the sound up, because you have no sound, and then you have low sound, middle sound, and high sound. Just press it 1 or 2 times and then stick it out the window. As long as it's safe, you feel safe doing this, drive your car, and just hold it outside or as Eric Windheim does, just put it on your dashboard and then just drive around on major boulevards. And you'll see where the 5G antennas are. And then you can park your car, get out, walk around like I did and test all this stuff.
And Oram, yes, we're finding some surprises too, with the radar coming off of vehicles as well. So that'll be a surprise when you start driving around town too. So yeah, Sharon, thanks for your comments. And we appreciate your questions. And we should move on to the next
Yes.
question.
Oh.
I see, Tony, how much time do we have left here?
We have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, shoot, okay. I wanted to give the floor to Magda Havas and Joel Moskowitz for a moment. If you could give Magda the floor first of all, and
Absolutely.
30
Magda,
seconds or so.
okay. Magda, I'm going to,
Oh, you can hear me now.
we can go right ahead.
What did you want me to say?
Do you
Rob?
have, yeah, I saw some questions come in. I just wanted to give you a chance to make some comments.
Well, one of the things we've done is with the Global EMF Network, which is a group of about 400 people globally who are using the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter to measure radiation in their neighborhoods or in their home or whatever. I asked a few of them to go back and actually measure once the 5G millimeter waves were activated by Verizon. And based on their map, we knew exactly where they were. And we had people in New York and Colorado who did that. And in both cases, the levels of radiation using the Safe and Sound Pro 2, so we're talking about, under 8 gigahertz, the levels went up quite dramatically in the areas that had the millimeter waves activated, but we weren't measuring millimeter waves, we were measuring the lower levels. And also the work that Hardell did with Mona Nielsen, they measured homes in Sweden that had 5G millimeter waves replacing 4G antennas. And using, once again, the Safe and Sound Pro, they found that levels in the apartment immediately below the antenna were much, much higher. So that's measuring the 4G, basically the 4G frequencies and not the millimeter wave frequencies. So my guess is that the levels are going to go up quite dramatically once the small cells come into a neighborhood, even beyond the millimeter waves.
Great.
Rob, could I respond to that?
Very quickly, Oram, sure.
Sure. And Magda, thank you so much. And your network, I mean, as they get these meters from Rob, your network of people are already well in place. They're well trained and gathering the data. So we're really excited and looking forward to what your group will tell us in the coming months as this meter becomes available to them. In my article on 5G on my website, createhealthyhomes.com, in the education section, I discussed the fact that from 2018 till about 2020, when the C-band was turned on by that Verizon had bought, the ultra wideband designation was only for the millimeter wave service, and they had by that time already 70 or 80 cities. And if you went to their 5G map, and I have a whole article about this on my website that I wrote at the time, you click on the link, you go to the map, and you just zoom in on any city in the United States, and you'll see a little grid, meaning like a little X, a little cross, or a plus sign. And that meant there was a particular intersection where a millimeter wave antenna had been put in place, and it only went out about a half a block in every direction, or because of those 3 antennas. But you could know where they were. So if you lived a block away, you really weren't bothered by that because there were houses in between which blocked 4G, let alone the millimeter wave service. But that went away when the C-band came out, because when they launched the C-band, which is in the mid-band at 3.5 to 4.2 gigahertz, that coverage is much more wide. At the time, I believe it was always on. And now it's just a sea of red. You don't see the individual X's anymore where the millimeter wave are, because they designate ultra wideband for the millimeter and the C-band coverage. And yes, and you will see an increase now of RF activity below 8 gigahertz, because that includes the 3.5 to 4 gigahertz mid-band range for the C-band. Okay, that Verizon got most of in that first tranche, a little bit for AT&T, and more of AT&T's tranche is coming out, or services coming out in the second tranche, which launched 2 years later. So that's 2024, next January. So yes, you'll pick that up. It's not millimeter wave service, it's C-band. But if you happen to have one of these Verizon phones, it will say 5G and then it'll say UW next to it. But you don't know whether that's millimeter wave or C-band. So if you have UW and you get out your 2 meters and the green one is high, but the blue one has nothing, it's C-band. But if the blue one is high and the green one is low, it's millimeter wave. That helps. So anyway.
Great, Oram. Thanks for clarifying that. Tony, how are we doing for time?
What? Did you want to ask Joel if he had a comment or two?
Yeah, exactly. If we have time still, I'd like Joel to take the floor for a sec.
But thank you for that question, Magda, and that report. It's very, very helpful.
I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Since these are consumer grade meters with plus or minus 5 decibel or plus or minus 6 decibel accuracy, are they adequate to use for scientific studies or for legal purposes, or should one stick with professional quality meters for those applications?
I know for a fact that Dave Stetzer has used the gigahertz solutions meters, the HF35C, which is a plus or minus 6 dB meter in court cases quite successfully. So I would say, if you've got a reliable meter that's measuring consistently, has some test data behind it to back it up, you're probably going to be okay. Just to give you a comment on the plus minus 5 dB that we have here, I'm going to introduce Bruce, one of our RF technicians and meter developers, to add some comments onto that. Bruce, could you comment on that statement if you're still in the presentation here?
Yes. Hello, Rob. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Welcome. This is the fully anechoic chamber.
I noticed that.
Yeah, just thought there's a computer in here. We've got Ethernet service in here, so I thought I'd set up for that. So this is where all the testing for the millimeter wave meter happens. Countless hours have been spent here. Okay, so the question relating to the tolerance, this lab is calibrated with NIST standard equipment. So in other words, we don't have a formal qualification, but all the equipment used during our testing and measurement is certified as calibrated in the last year. So essentially that means that the calibration plot that you see for the millimeter wave with the stub antenna that we've just discovered here in the last week due to antenna material changes, and believe it or not, the Lexan label that sits on top of the case. Apologies to the beta testers for dealing with the handmade cardboard labels, but now we have real Lexan labels. But those Lexan labels actually affect the frequency response of the stub antenna, not the horn antenna. So when we say a specification of plus or minus 5 dB, yes, this is, as Rob alluded to, because the manufacturer, in our case, Safe Living Technologies, can certify that this equipment was tested in an environment with traceable equipment. So I don't see an issue for that. We are planning to send this meter to a few labs as well out of country, just to confirm, as we did with the Pro 2, that the results are duplicatable around the world. And then there was one other comment I wanted to make to Oram. One interesting test you might want to do with the 5G and beamforming is to have maybe 2 meters, one horn antenna pointing at the cell tower itself, and 1 meter measuring, so that you can determine that when your cell starts talking in the millimeter wave band to the cell phone tower, that the beamforming starts happening. And what you're listening to all the time is the beacon, But when you're so that 500,000 that you measured, I'm assuming that was with the stub antenna, so you don't know whether it was.
No. Clear that 500, the 500,000 was clearly from my phone, Bruce. Not
Was
from,
it with this with the horn antenna?
no, stub antenna.
Right. So the stub antenna is going to pick up.
Yeah, but
possible. It's
but I-
possible that there could be some high power densities with
we can talk more about that offline between now and the 12th of July. My point is, I because I'm really savvy at using this even for directionality. I was even talking to somebody about this last night at another meeting, Liz Menkas, that I use all the tricks of the trade so that I don't have to get out the log pair antenna. By holding this next to my body and walking towards, I'm always moving around and paying very close attention to how the volume changes and how the numbers changes on this. And which sound I'm getting out of the symphony of 4 or 5 sounds, depending on where I am. So I used the same skill set with this the first time I used it to differentiate the signal from my phone because I was outside, and when I got close to this, it went way high in the hundreds of thousands. But when I got away from my phone, I put it, on a windowsill and I walked towards the antenna, and I was only getting, and I put my body in between, so my phone's behind me, and I was getting purely from the antenna. So I could tell. And I don't think that this 80 to 100 to 500 to 1,000 microwatts is a beacon signal. I know that was suggested by another beta tester. I would be surprised because these antenna manufacturers all said that the beacon signal is minus 65, minus 70 dBm. And we actually documented that at the Viavi booth, who make oscilloscopes, just like Rode and Schwartz. They may make testing equipment for the industry at the convention center. So we went to that booth, and that's in my article. There's actually a picture of it. And then it says, let's see, 27.9 gigahertz. So it's obviously 28 gigahertz. And it said minus 65 to minus 70, just like they said. And it's every second it bursts out. And then you could see up in the rafters with this little white box, that's the Verizon 5G millimeter wave antenna. That's in the LA Convention Center, no matter who comes there, the car show or the 5G show. It's been there since 2018. And so my point is, we were picking up that beacon signal. Okay. But then I asked Alistair Phillips and Trevor Marshall, what does that equate to? And they said in our unit of measurement that we use in the building biology profession, they said about 0.1 or 0.01 microwatt per meter squared. Now, the point is, we get much more than that from the 4G antennas that are in every neighborhood that we analyze when I stand on anybody's lawn and measure with this thing. Okay, so I'm less concerned about that beacon signal. And because the numbers that I got with this, your meter that you designed with Rob were, 80 to 100 to 500 to 1,000. Maybe that is the beacon signal. But what I didn't notice that there was more power density coming from the antenna when my phone was engaged. Because I actually was running an internet radio just to get some activity, and I propped it up on a building, and then I walked away from my phone. It didn't change at all whether I had that on or not to what I knew was a Verizon antenna. And I knew it was a Verizon antenna because it was UW, number one, although it could be C-band, and then it made this thing go high. You follow me?
No, that's great, Oram.
I'm trying to whittle all this down. And
right, we have 2 antennas with 2 purposes. So if you're hesitant about directionality, the horn antenna is specifically designed for that, and it will put beyond a shadow of a doubt where the signal is coming from. So different methods of doing things. So you've got different methods of checking. So whatever you're comfortable with, go ahead and feel free to use either.
Peter, should we ask Peter Cirque to answer that question that Joel raised about the
realities of measurement?
Yeah, and the accuracy of do you have any experience with that, Peter? On the accuracy of the minus 5 dB or however that works with the meters?
Do we still have Peter Sirik connected?
He is, I don't know, but he's muted. So if you are there, Peter, and can hear us and have any comments, you can unmute yourself and let us know. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just thought you might have an answer to that. Okay, so anyway, Rob, I know you want to wrap it up.
Okay, are there any more, should we take some more questions? A couple more questions perhaps?
Sure. Alberto's been waiting for a long time. You want to unmute yourself, sir, and ask your question? You still there? Alberto, there you are.
Thank you very much. First one, I had trouble with my time zone because here in Mexico, we didn't change our time zone. So I was late. It would be great to have the opportunity to see the replay of this conference. That's the first one. The second, I have a HF35Z. Now I know that we have more advanced meters. So what is the relative use or help that this HF35Z will give me? And if and I would like to, if I can substitute this older equipment with the new ones.
Okay,
That's all.
yeah, the
Thank you very
frequency-
much.
no problem. So this webinar will be made public online, and Tony's going to send out the links to everybody as well once we have it posted on our website. So you'll be able to see the complete webinar as well. All of you will to review anything you'd like. Now the HF35C, I believe it goes from 700 megahertz to 2.5 gigahertz. So it covers a quite large area of cell phone radiation, but it doesn't cover them all. So it doesn't go down to 600 megahertz, and we're missing, between the 2.5 and 6 gigahertz. So you're going to get, you're still going to get quite strong signals coming in off of that meter, but it won't cover the complete low band of cellular frequencies. The Safe and Sound Pro will, but you're still going to see significant readings. You may miss some as well, but it's useful in that way. And it is a directional meter as opposed to an omnidirectional meter, so it will help you locate sources also.
But you have to move it because you won't pick up signals that are to the sides of that antenna.
Correct, or behind you, yes. You would need to rotate the meter 360 degrees around a pivot point. Yeah.
And
Thank
you'll
you
miss
very much. And the use of an attenuator of signal will increase that power?
No, it won't increase the frequency range. It'll increase the strength of the signals that it can measure. So right now it goes up to 2,000 microwatts per square meter. If you add the attenuator, you'll get up to 200,000 microwatts per square meter.
Well, or you'll get a
power density.
reading on the display if the reading is over 2,000. Otherwise, it just goes blank and you don't know what the reading is. That's
correct. Yeah, if it goes over 2,000, you'll see a 1 in the far left-hand side of the display. And that indicates that you're off scale and you need to attach the attenuator in order to get your proper readings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Alberto.
thanks,
For joining
Alberto.
us from Mexico.
Justice, you want to unmute yourself? And
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
If I was to get Starlink, would the EMFs just hit the dish and not affect me at all? Or
That's a perennial question, and it's really confusing to people. We have a study group here in Southern California that I host, and one of the regular attendees is a gentleman who works for Hughes satellite company, and he tells me that these satellite. So first of all, the TV satellites are in geostationary orbit, so they're 22,000 miles above the equator. If they were any lower, they would move relative to the Earth. So to stay above the same spot and rotate with the Earth, they have to be 22,000 miles up. And then you go to wherever you are in whatever continent you're in. So you've got like a right angle, and then you've got a hypotenuse of a triangle there. So it's 25 or 27,000 miles, and it comes down. These signals come down. If you look at the the coverage area. It literally goes from the Pacific Ocean to Denver, and from, you know, Calgary to Mexico City. I mean, it's a huge, there's like a whole western half of the continent. And then they have another one that covers the eastern half of the continent like that. And so it's very weak. They come in straight, and you need a parabolic dish to reflect them up to a point at the focal point, and that's where the receiver is. And then you have an amplifier that amplifies that signal, and it goes down the coaxial cable, and that's your input for your satellite TV or internet. And so you have the same exposure in the Grand Canyon as you do, or away from civilization in the middle of the forest, as you do in a city. And I have clients who say, well, doesn't the fact that I live in a city mean that that all the users pull it in, and or if I have a dish on my house, or my neighbor has a dish, that it's going to pull the signal in more? The answer is no. It's not what happens physically. And the transmitter doesn't go back up to the satellite. It's not strong enough to make it 27,000 miles back up. If you want to change channels, that goes through another means, through a local telephone connection or internet connection somehow. That's what it was explained to me. However, having said all that, there are people who are electrically sensitive, who don't feel well when they're near these satellite dishes when they're in operation. And so we defer to them. I don't try and quarrel with them because that's what they feel. And so we've always, in our profession, gone by, you know, whatever. And we can't measure this, by the way, because the frequencies, it's in the K band, and that's in the chat here. We may be able to measure them with this, but I don't know whether the stub antenna or horn antenna will pick up what comes from outer space. It's so weak. I don't know that we would see it. It wouldn't be above.
Let's direct this question to Bruce again.
Sure.
Bruce, do you have some comments on Starlink and the measurement capabilities of satellites with the meter?
Yes. So, right, the signals are extremely weak. My understanding is Starlink is in the 10, 12, 14 gigahertz range, so it's not going to be received by this millimeter wave meter.
That's true.
This meter, when we have a frequency range of 18 with the stub antenna to 40 gigahertz, below 18 gigahertz, this meter is not going to receive anything. So for Starlink, we need to have a mid-band meter, or a meter that covers from the 8 to 18 gigahertz range. Even then, we would need a fairly high gain horn antenna in order to receive the power densities that are present from the Starlink antenna. So, we get asked that a lot as well. I get asked that a lot from friends, and it's not a concern. I just tell my friends that there's far more concern with your Wi-Fi router and bigger issues that are here on planet Earth at this particular time. Yes, there is a growing ecosystem. The Starlink missions are happening all the time. Incredible to watch them launch, but I'm not concerned about the power densities. At some point, we can, if, for example, we've got some high gain horn antennas that we were testing months ago for this millimeter wave meter here in the chamber. They're much larger horns, and if there were Starlink satellites in the 20 to 40 gigahertz range, that the antennas we were testing would be sensitive enough to hear them.
But not in the anechoic chamber, because whatever the roof, the material on the roof.
Yeah, obviously outside of the chamber, but we were generating power densities inside the chamber that would simulate these kind of satellite power densities on the planet, like, in other words, for really low power levels. So we can tell how sensitive things are.
Well, and again, that there's a group of people who know each other, and one of them is a client of mine, and she said they'll call each other, they'll notify each other and say the military is doing something, and then they actually know people in the military say, we just did a test. These people can feel that.
Wow.
Wherever they are, they can't escape it. And so now, the troubling thing for us as practitioners is when these individuals report this and talk about it, as they should, as they need to, and we need to figure out what to do about this. But the vast majority of the population is not that sensitive. I don't know how to put this. I think if I keep talking about it, I'm gonna
Yeah,
get some
Oram, can I-
blowback or put my,
Can I ask Bruce another question here?
yeah.
So safety on the ground for us as well too. So the Earth station part of Starlink, can you confirm that that is a transmitter to satellites in space, or is it a local transmitter to cell phone towers? What's your knowledge on that?
No, that's a transmitter. It's two-way, because
But to what, Bruce?
up to the satellites directly. Yes.
But
because-
how big does that have to be to do that?
Well, there's the initially Starlink had the Dishy McFlat face, so it's about this diameter, and so there is a transmitter and receiver in that, because you don't need to be near any cell network. These are designed to work, where there is no internet access whatsoever. So I also tell people in the second part, answer to that question, is that when you have Starlink, generally speaking, Starlink is on your roof or somewhere out of sight. And these are beam-formed antennas pointing towards wherever the satellite happens to be at that particular time. Those satellites are moving very quickly. I wouldn't get near a Starlink transmit or Starlink antenna when it's on, because there will be some side lobes coming, even from beamform, especially in the 10 to 12 gigahertz range. I mean, I have lots of experience in the X band with the other work that I do. So you don't want to be near the Starlink antenna when it's on, but if it's above you on your roof, the amount of RF coming down from the Starlink antenna itself will be negligible. But there will be more from the antenna itself if you're in the area than there will be from the satellites themselves. But Starlink antennas do transmit, absolutely.
Right, so you don't want to place yourself between the satellite and that transmitter.
No, the other way around, Rob.
Either actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just want to maintain a distance from that, and you don't want to see the front. You don't want to be in line of sight or the front of that dish. You want that above you and out of the way.
But only because it was transmitted from the dish up to the satellite, not from what comes from the satellite down to the dish.
That's correct. We're concerned about
Correct,
the
Bruce?
transmitter on the Earth station side. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you a lot for answering that question. I have one more question. When they install light poles with the lights, are those also 5G, and how dangerous are they?
We get that question a lot, and there are individuals who you have to be very careful when you take an RF meter and go out into your yard and go out on your street. I've had clients who insist that that thing is transmitting, and it's not. What they're picking up is a cell tower that's in the other direction. They don't understand how to differentiate. So I'll say that first. Now, yes, there are small cell arrays that are put on light poles. Yes, and you can see them. So it depends on what the permit has allowed, what the local companies have done. These small cell antennas, Justice, usually contain 4G LTE equipment. And they're doing that. The companies do that to augment the service that's provided by their legacy macro towers that are in more commercial sites that are a mile to a mile and a half apart for each of the 4 carriers. That they have power density, effective radiated power of 800 to 1,000 watts generally. The small but they're running out of bandwidth, and because there's a hockey stick every 2 years, the amount of data is doubling in urban areas by users, so by customers of each of these companies. So to offload that traffic, they're dropping in these small cell antennas in residential neighborhoods. They're more prevalent than millimeter wave antennas. And the people, the activists who really understand the technology say that it's the 4G and low band and mid band 5G installations that are more problematic because they're always on. Now that's true now for the millimeter wave, as we're finding out, but they're more rare. And I don't know yet whether the mid band, C band and CBRS transmitters are beamformed or not. They can be, but does that mean that they are? I don't know. I want to find that out when I go to the meeting in September. Anyway, all these things have to be taken.
Okay, I swear, this is my last question. I got a Safe and Sound Pro 2, and I'm in an area where the frequency or whatever the level is 700,000 microwatts per square meter. So I was told that actually trips the chip inside the system, will this still work? Will this thing still work at lower frequencies or lower power levels later?
Of course.
The Safe and Sound Pro 2, there's no thermal protection required or needed for the Safe and Sound Pro 2, just in the millimeter wave meter. So you're perfectly fine.
But Justice, are you getting 700,000 on the top line on this meter? On the floating peak line?
No, on the average.
Oh, wait, what? No, you never get that high on the average.
That's what it says. And I've even gone into like an area where there's like lots of cement and stuff, and it got lower. Like there's a lot of towers around here.
Okay, but 700,000 is a number we don't usually, those of us who are experienced, who do this every day for a living, we don't usually see that kind of number outside.
I just heard a guy reporting 500,000.
This is, I'm not sure what this could be. We would have to maybe take this offline, and maybe if you wanted to talk with our tech support guys on this, maybe we could help you figure that one out.
Just as I hate to, don't take this the wrong way.
Okay.
Is it possible that your phone was not on airplane mode when you were doing this testing? Because a phone in your pocket will do that.
No, I'm very careful about all
Okay,
that. I
just
have
saying.
my phone off and in airplane mode and in a suitcase.
Well, but even in airplane mode, you can have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on or not connected, and they'll transmit in airplane mode.
Okay.
Just saying, so these numbers are not making sense to those of us who have experience doing this every day. I'm not saying you're not experiencing it, and who knows? So we could do some kind of testing. I don't know how we can do it with FaceTime, because you need to have the transmitter on. But anyway, it could be explored. But maybe with some guidance from somebody to help you, just to make sure that you're measuring what you are to make sure that you're getting the right data.
I'll address my questions to the Safe Living site.
Please. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jerome.
Another thing that comes to mind with that too, if you have high average values, that means you could be measuring high levels of analog signals present as well too. Or you could have dozens and dozens of active cell phone conversations going on. That would create the average value to go high too.
Not 700,000. Rob.
Yes, actually, I live in an area in Mexico, actually, where there's a lot of people who have dishes for TV. So maybe that's doing it. I don't know.
Nope, not even in the same frequency range that your Safe and Sound Pro measures.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Now you got to talk to the engineers at Rob's company.
We'll try and figure that one out for you. But Tony, I think we're running out of our time here, and we should probably draw this to a conclusion. We are going to have another session coming up. Tony, do you have the date on that? And if you're on the email list, you will receive that invitation as well, and we can continue on with this. Basically, right now we're in learning mode for the millimeter wave exposures that we're seeing, and looking for user inputs. There's going to be dozens and over 100 meters going out to users in the next week or so. So we look to you to receive your meters and to gain input from your measuring in your local areas. And we can review your comments. If you have some videos or questions, you can pose them in the next chat session and webinar session, and we will try to review those in the future. So we're going to try and keep this up for the next few months for sure. Just have regular meetings, understanding what's out there and learning more about these new millimeter wave signals that we're experiencing. So I'll have one of the engineers with us as well too. So if there's any highly technical questions about meters or RF, we'll have some feedback from them as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending this meeting today, and we hope to see you again in a couple weeks. And Tony will be in touch with the dates on that. And Tony, did you want to make any comments, final comments?
I was going to say it's July 12th, same time, 2 p.m. EST, EDT, as Oram would like me to say.
The daylight time.
Daylight time, but it's basically 2 p.m. same time, and a new link will be sent out. Everyone's welcome.
And that was
Exactly.
Spark's observation.
And I think,
to give kudos where-
Orm's gonna have an update to his presentation, so it'll be more new information for the next one.
Yes, and I need to convert my slides from Keynote over to PowerPoint from Microsoft, and then get them over to you guys, because if you don't have a Mac, you can't play it. So yeah, I'll do that. So you can play the videos if
Yeah.
that works out. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
great. That's great. So we'll compile all this information on our website and make it clickable and downloadable for all and the general public. And Oram may have it posted on his website as well too.
Well, I'll have my PowerPoint posted on my website, and I need a day or two to make that conversion. But yes, so give me a day or two to get that to my website into SLT.
Okay, great. Then let's conclude this meeting, and we'll see you guys again next time. Thank you very much. Appreciate you attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Oram.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.